Hi, I'm Bob Gimlin. In 2015, everyone's favorite Survivorman went to Romania to survive in the Transylvanian Alps, and it was so exciting that this episode became a two-parter. And in part 1, there's about 3 seconds that are really pretty nuts, if I may say so myself. And I recently saw a screenshot of it on a different channel, and I thought it must be fake, so I went to the source itself, watched the whole way through, and sure enough, it was there. Here it is. It's about 3 seconds. And Les has posted all the episodes of Survivorman on YouTube, so I'll put a link in the video description. Did you see it? Right here. So, what are we looking at? We, or I rather, maybe I shouldn't assume you two, but I certainly may be falling victim to pareidolia. Albeit a rather ominous case of pareidolia, but pareidolia nonetheless, nothing more. And usually I'd be more eager to call out pareidolia, but this is just so detailed. This is exactly what I'd expect to see were such a creature in this shot. I literally just covered an encounter where the witness said the creature had deep creases running across the forehead. I see the classic visored eyes, the brow ridge, relatively small forehead, lack of neck, broad shoulders. And though it looks detailed, I suppose that's part of the pareidolia phenomena, that I'm actually the one giving it features, and it doesn't really have them. I don't believe it moves at all, which certainly supports that it's something static, or stationary, but that in no way negates that it's something organic or biological, because many creatures are stock still when observing, or when being observed. It could be a hoax. This seems unlikely, but not impossible. In fact, I feel like Les would be disappointed if I said Les would never do that, because Les knows you shouldn't trust anyone completely, especially a TV person. If it is a hoax perpetrated by Les, then I think it would be more like a hidden Easter egg that some viewers may notice, but the vast majority won't. But the stunt would ultimately result in weirdos like me talking about the show in the years to come. Although, to accept the premise of the show at all is to accept that Les hoaxing this would be near impossible, seeing as he only has what he can carry on his back, and he typically goes through his supplies on camera, as each one offers unique and precious utility. Now I'm going to mess with the contrast and saturation a bit. And maybe it was his production crew, or the search and rescue playing a joke, though theoretically, they shouldn't have known exactly where he'd be. In short, I don't think this is a hoax. But one never knows. And I'd like to take a second to say that I'm actually quite ill right now, and I can't hear a damn thing, so I have no idea how this audio is going to turn out. Maybe a movie was filmed there, and a prop was left behind. Possible, but my understanding is that this place is far too remote for that. Production crews tend to go to places that look desolate, but aren't. Usually drivable places, which this certainly isn't. If Les had to arrive in a helicopter and then take a hike to get to the location, I doubt that a film crew was ever there. Who knows how long ago, but perhaps someone made a little carving or something. Maybe it was Vlad himself, and there it stayed for all these years, only to be captured by a Canadian survivalist and aired for precisely 3.755 seconds. Again, possible, but not likely. Gosh. Call me crazy, but when I overexpose the footage, it almost looks like the eye widens. But who knows? See that? Though it could certainly just be the result of the camera moving. The Alps of Transylvania are what I consider to be probably the most wild place in Europe. Except for maybe Norway and Finland. And I make this assertion as someone who is woefully uninformed on the matter. Maybe some of my Euro friends can correct me, but I know that central Romania has one of the largest and most stable populations of brown bears in Europe. Of course, they also have boars and wolves, meaning other large things can live there. Here's a map of brown bear range in Europe, and I've long thought that brown bears, as opposed to black bears, are an adequate barometer to determine if a creature such as this could survive, and not only because of the obvious parallels between the density of energy yields of the environment, but simply because of the proximity to people. Brown bears cannot exist where human populations are dense. They simply can't. Black bears can. Brown bears can't. Conflicts simply occur too frequently, and the bears are either spooked or dealt with. So if you ask me, There's no question that there's ample room and resource for an alleged Sasquatch-like creature to subsist here indefinitely. I don't know, looking at this again, I feel like I got too excited. It's likely nothing. Les is a pretty smart fellow, and I'm sure that every clip that goes into an episode is scrutinized multiple times by multiple sets of competent eyes more competent than mine. Surely they would have noticed it, or failing that, would have noticed it by now. And surely they have far more footage than less than 4 seconds. And if it was nothing of note, they probably wouldn't have said anything. And if it was noteworthy, they probably would have said something, which as far as I can tell, they have not. I did a bit of sleuthing and I can't find any indication that Les has ever addressed this fleeting visage. I hope he does, or has, if for no greater purpose than to have a chuckle at the expense of people like me, and use it as an example to espouse on how some people only see what they want to see, because this may indeed be a pristine example of the games our eyes and brains collude to play. Or, of course, it could be something else entirely. Even if this legitimately is a Sasquatch, or an Almas maybe would be a better term, or Almaste. Technically, there's still really no reason to think it is. Seeing as the subject isn't proven, I really should defer to the fact that this is likely a cryptid-shaped lump. But it is a pretty compelling lump. Of the thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours of footage that Les has collected for this show, eventually, something was bound to look like a Bigfoot. Perhaps like life itself, the forest is nothing if not a giant Rorschach ink blot. And mere months before this episode aired, Les literally had an entire season dedicated to the big guy, so I think his mind would have been calibrated to notice such a thing. In the editing room, if not in the woods. Perhaps Les still has footage from this moment, where a step in either direction reveals the bushy nature of this apparition. It looks like something that many have claimed to see. And what do you think he would have thought if he captured this on a Bigfoot episode, and should that matter? And to be honest, I don't know much about sightings and reports of such a creature in that particular part of the world, but if here, why not there? And the more I look at it, the more it seems to move. But I don't know. For a great deal of human history, and it varied by place and culture of course, but for a great deal of human history, medical science was an absolute joke. You know, a physician 200 years ago could watch today's open heart surgery, and he would likely have just assumed that it was murder. So it's important to not get discouraged by failures, because sometimes the answer lingers long after the will to seek it has faltered. I will say, if you watch this episode, you'll notice that moments before he filmed this, Les nearly tumbled off a cliff. Literally, he actually almost went off a cliff. And I'm a long-time fan of the series, and I've watched all of them at some point or another. And there are really only a handful of times that he seems to get legitimately frazzled. Another instance that comes to mind is when he saw a jaguar in South America. And sometimes they're slightly contrived. Not that I think he faked them, but every once in a while I think something happens that for the purpose of the show he acts like it was a bigger deal than it was. But this wasn't one of them. I think he was truly very disturbed and rattled by this almost fall. And it's easy to understand why. I'm sure his mind was racing with the possibilities of what would have happened next. What would his next few hours have looked like? Would I have died? Would I be able to get to my emergency transponder? Would they ever figure out what happened to me? Bad things like that can happen fast. Perhaps something from somewhere came to discreetly warn of doom, or maybe just to watch. And that does seem like a likely place for an opportunistic predator to perch, waiting for the unwary to take a tumble. Just a thought. Anyway, ever since I saw this silhouette, I knew I had to say something about it, even though I didn't really know what to say, so I guess I just hope it was worth your time. Either way, that sure is interesting. And anyway again, and as always, thanks an awful lot for listening.